remember after the Mulroney government collapsed, essentially, I think the progressive conservatives were reduced to 3 seats federally, right? That could easily happen.
Here's an interesting story. Everybody, you find this a lot, this sort of speculation about, this Trump thing, could it happen in Canada? Right-wing populism, yada, yada. Everyone wets their pants. Oh, my God, not here. Well, it actually did happen here, and it happened back then, and it was the Reform Party.
Yeah, that's also happening in the UK. You know that Farage fashioned his party after the Reform Party in Canada.
Well,
right?
one of the things I think conservatives should remember about the Reform Party is the result of the Reform Party was they reduced the Conservatives to 3. And they ushered in a decade of Liberal rule. So good luck to you, lads.
Yeah.
Canadians, I think, are, and this is something I also want to stress. The overwhelming majority of Canadians are not anti-Semites.
Oh, definitely not. Yes.
I would say probably the overwhelming majority of Muslims are not anti-Semites. Although that's hard to say. I referred to...
It also depend to some degree on how you phrase the question.
That's right. Mm-hmm. In fact, I referred to a study of Muslim public opinion.
Yeah.
And it was actually the proportion of Muslims who agreed to answer a particular question about suicide bombing and about whether or not the state of Israel should be allowed to exist. Mm-hmm. That was, it was pretty high. Do you remember there was a big debate about 6 years ago about Islamophobia?
Oh yes,
in Canada, there was going to be law. There was going to be statutory reform to sort of outlaw Islamophobia.
Yeah, another hate crime.
The liberals refused to define what they actually meant by Islamophobia.
You define that sort of thing after the fact.
Yeah, and you would hear the liberals say that every day, Muslims in Canada are subjected to racist abuse and intimidation, that sort of thing. And I remember, because I'm a complete public opinion poll nerd, data is the thing. I need to give me the data. Everybody's opinion, who cares? Give me the data. And public opinion back then showed that the overwhelming majority of, Muslims in Canada were actually demonstrating a higher degree of pride in their country than what you might call old stock Canadians. Mm-hmm. And the main complaint that Muslims had about Canada was it's so damn cold here. Mm-hmm. Nobody was worried about, nobody was
perfectly
freaking...
valid complaint, by the way.
Nobody, it's just, I think we have to be very, very, very careful about understanding the nature of the problem. And we have to be very careful about the words that we use, the language that we use. And we all use these words that kind of euphemisms, left-wing or progressive. Are you kidding me? What is progressive about the phenomena that we end up describing as progressive? How is this in any way in aid of human progress or civilizational progress? It's reactionary. It's regressive. It's not liberal, what have you.
How much knowledge do you think typical Canadians have about what's going on?
Very, very little.
And why do you think that is?
A lot. Okay, here's a proposition. Everybody likes to beat up on the news media, right? I've come up in the news media in the old discipline. You spend 6 years as an apprentice before you're a journeyman in the old guild system. 6 years as a reporter. After that, maybe you'll be allowed to have an opinion about something. Really elaborate conventions and disciplines in what was essentially a trade, a craft. And with the golden era was about the 1980s, I would say, 1970s, 1980s. And then with the advent of digital technologies and a whole bunch of other reasons, the news media, the conventional news media began to wither away and collapse. And it's replaced by, people talk about the mainstream media. Well, the mainstream media today is Twitter. That's the mainstream media now. And so in this period, it became increasingly difficult for journalists to actually tell a story, the results be damned. It's much easier to basically fill your shift with 3 or 4 stories for deadline, each of which more or less uphold the narrative framework of the subscriber base that your media organization is targeting. A lot of it really is about the decline and the collapse of news media. I mean, I can talk about that a little bit because it's something I know. But I think a lot of it too, I think, is language, is simple language that probably ends up with, most ordinary people who are only casually interested in the struggle for democracy in China or events in the Middle East or this strange creature that has come to occupy all the spaces where the Liberal Party used to be. It's the language that we use. How conservatives are the conservative? How liberal are the liberal?
Well, the Conservatives in the UK weren't very conservative for the 14 years they governed.
Yeah,
so.
I mean...
and we'll see what happens in Canada.
You can't call Donald Trump a conservative. He's anything but.
Well...
I don't think you can call Justin Trudeau liberal, really, in any conventional sense.
No, I don't...
Very authoritarian, very much a sort of state capitalist, thought control kind of... way of looking at politics.
Well, one of the things our discussion is sort of highlighting, I think, is that let's say you adopt the narrative that the center is corrupt and patriarchal and oppressive, and Canada's destiny is post-national. Okay, now, one hypothetical problem with that is, well, what rises to take the place of the center? And you've pointed to all sorts of things, like a demented kind of neo-Marxism, the rise of an authoritarian UN on the foreign policy front, the dire and dismal influence of the Chinese Communist Party, the rise of the Islamist faction of the increasingly large Muslim population. And then, well, okay, that's four. And then the rise and the associated rise of the colonialist narrative that casts Israel as king of the oppressive states, right? So it's this fractionation. Once that center collapses, instead of everybody becoming free, you get this absurd fractionation, and then a war between different, what would you say, centers of power. And we're trying to flesh out the pattern of that. I mean, you pointed to a lot of things that are going wrong simultaneously, and there's some thread that unites them, but some of it's just emblematic of a kind of chaotic collapse of identity, right? And Trudeau's going to step out of this, leaving us in Canada in a terrible mess. Let's talk about Poilievre a little bit. I mean, I know him, and what I've seen so far, I'm happy about. I mean, I've been talking to conservatives in Canada ever since 2016, really, when I sort of burst onto the scene in my opposition to Bill C-16. And the conservatives that I talked to 8 years ago were much more timid bunch than the conservatives that are emerging in Canada now. And so Poilievre and Daniel Smith, they're both tough people. And so that's heartening as far as I'm concerned. Whether Poilievre is in a position to right the ship that Trudeau has inverted, that's a whole different question.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish him well, but I'm also pleased in a, what would you say, personal sense that I don't have his job. Because, I look at Canada with a kind of horror at the moment because we are in very bad shape economically. And I mean, just the fact that Canadians now make 60% as much as the average American, and our real estate is twice as expensive. Yeah, and the trajectory is downward, right? And I think it was, was it World Economic Forum or the World Bank? I don't remember which agency. Their projection for Canada was worst performing economy over the next 30 years in the G7.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's on top of the fact, that's adjacent to the fact that if Canada had its act together in anything approximating a realistic manner, at least the West could be rich beyond belief, because it's definitely the case that the world is dying, fighting for our natural resources.